Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be diving into episodes 320 through 322, which will cover manga chapters 435 through 437. And yeah, we get to return to the canon material after a short break with the fillers. And here we will get to see the emotional welcome of a new crew member as well as a new ship. So let's get into the synopsis. With the new ship completed, they're now ready to set out to sea again, but not before they get news of all their new bounties applied to each of their heads now. With a bounty also now on Franky's head, it's no longer safe for him to be on Water 7, but everyone has to band together to convince Franky to set out with the Straw Hats, where everyone knows that is where his true dream lies. Alrighty, so differences. There aren't actually that many differences, surprisingly, in these episodes. Throughout the episodes, you will get to see, they'll insert like flashbacks to previous episodes. Obviously, the new flashbacks are all canon material. However, they do show a lot of scenes from the past episodes, and all of those inserted ones are pretty much filler. One of the big changes, though, is we don't actually get to see Sogeking's bounty poster in the anime. Unlike the manga, it's actually a two-page spread of all the bounty posters sprawled across the grass, and you can actually see Sogeking's bounty poster as well as his dollar or his berry value as well. But we don't actually get to see that in the anime. We just get a small throwaway line from Luffy saying that, oh, Sogeking's got a bounty poster as well, and that's about it. We don't actually get to see it until a little bit later. The other thing that they added in these episodes that I really enjoyed is the sort of added reaction moments from Franky's ball crushing moment. So in the anime, every so often Franky will like writhe in pain, and then he'll just yell out a random fruit to sort of signify his testicles. And so the first time you see an orange hanging from a tree to look like a testicle or a ball, and he just yells out, "Ow, orange!" It's so funny. Or like, "Oh, grape!" And then the other one, the last one I believe is apple. And these gags crack me up. I don't know who thought about that or who thought of that idea, but that was genius. But aside from those, there's really no real differences. They hold pretty true to the manga in these 3 episodes. But with that out of the way, let's get into my thoughts of these episodes. So the first thing to note is Yuriko Yamaguchi is back from her maternity leave as she returns as the voice of Robin as of episode 320. So yay for that. Her replacement wasn't bad or anything, but I mean, you really can't replace Yuriko Yamaguchi in terms of Robin. She just inhabits that voice so well. Anyways, the shipwrights are all hard at work building the new ship, during which Iceberg and Franky have kind of a heart-to-heart where we see a really awesome and heartfelt exchange between the two. Iceberg finally recognizing Franky for his gifts and skills, even if it came at a high cost. It finally shows to him that Tom didn't die in vain. Not that I think Iceberg ever thought that, but I'm sure at the early onset of losing Tom, there was definitely a lot of resentment towards each other. And this conversation between the two is really important for both Franky and us, the audience, to really get the full picture of what all of this really means for Franky and to the full extent of what his dream is. And to bring his past with Tom and Iceberg full circle, especially what Tom's words and lessons really meant is really shown here. What Tom was really trying to teach them, but Franky more so than Iceberg, is that he doesn't care what they build, but as long as they build it with that dong pride, is what I think the real underlying message that Tom was trying to say is that yes, they, especially them, have the capabilities to build very dangerous and world-changing things, but it's not just about being proud of what they build, but keeping in mind that sort of responsibility they have after they build it, but also especially before they build these powerful and dangerous ships. You know, as a shipwright, you can't just kind of wash your hands of it when a ship is done and hand it off to its new owner or whoever. They have to consider it even before they build the ship. And it's sort of this thought of, if I give this ship these powerful capabilities, can I be confident that they won't be used for malicious intent? As well as who they're building it for, as in, if I build this ship for these people, can I trust them with it? And if they build a ship, when all is said and done, can they still stand proud of what they did and believe in that ship that they built was the right thing? And Tom's ultimate message was, I believe, that if the answer to these questions was a no, then they would have the foresight not to build the ship in the first place. And so if you do build it, you need to bear that responsibility because, as he says, you can't blame the ship. It's what it's used for is the real crux of the argument. And this is the reason why Iceberg now recognizes Frankie as a legitimate shipwright in his eyes, because Frankie finally understands this lesson. However, there's also another aspect to what Iceberg is trying to get at here about Frankie's dream that we'll talk about in a little bit. But in the meantime, we do see Usopp trying to figure out and rehearsing how he's going to rejoin the crew as Sanji kind of saw him during the fillers. So that one particular scene where Sanji runs across Usopp practicing this is canon. He tries to go visit them at the Galila company, but then he stumbles across them looking through a window as he sees them all incredibly intense and serious staring at each other, so he kind of reconsiders. We will eventually see what they were all talking about in this moment, but in his lame attempt, he tries to draw their attention while also reenacting what they possibly might actually act like if they saw him. But then Nami just comes over and closes the blinds and shuts the lights off, leaving Usopp out in the cold, which is a pretty funny scene. The next morning, the crew wakes to the log filled up, and Kokoro lets them know that the next island that it's probably pointing to is the undersea island, Fishman Island. And this is pretty huge since this is an island that we have been aware of for quite some time. And even the crew's reaction to this news says it all, in that this will be an emotionally complex place to visit due to Nami's history with Arlong. However, something I have to commend Zoro for is this sort of non-racist view of the situation, that he doesn't judge all fish people like they are Arlong, as most likely Arlong and his pirates are just that, evil pirates of Fishman Island. And it's correctly surmised that, yeah, much of the citizens are probably decent people who are just normal fish people just trying to live out their daily lives, just like most of society, and that dangerous and evil pirates are probably in the small minority compared to just regular normal citizens, even among the human races or the other races in One Piece. However, it does not look like Fishman Island may be exactly their next island, as Kokoro goes on to explain that in order to get to Fishman Island, they'll need to navigate through something called the Florian Triangle, obviously referencing the real-world urban legend, the Bermuda Triangle, which is a section of the Atlantic Ocean near the Florida Ocean, kind of in a triangle between Florida, the Caribbean islands, and Bermuda, where the legend goes is that many vessels, both sea and airborne, have been said to have gone missing in that area without a trace. And in fact, the name Florian is probably derived off of the point of the triangle in real life being Florida. So Oda, instead of just using the Bermuda Islands, he just shifted over one point and went to Florida and called it the Florian Triangle. Of course, Nami is terrified to go to a place like this, but as soon as Robin mentions that there's probably going to be a lot of lost ships with a bunch of treasures trapped on these, she quickly changes her tune and is all game with Luffy to go search this Florian Triangle. So yeah, there might be a little bit of a detour, I feel like, before we get to Fishman Island. One note about this scene, though, is at about 19-20 seconds, Zoro's face as he's pondering whether he might find a sword on one of these ships is so low effort, it's hilarious. I mean, who approved this design? His face looks so bad. There's like no detail on it, and he just looks like like a poor cartoonish drawing. Like, he doesn't have any facial features. I don't even think he has eyebrows in this. It's just his eyes and like a slit for his like nose and mouth. It's so bad. But this is one of those cases where it's so bad that inadvertently it becomes pretty funny. So I'm kind of glad they left it in. Just then, a bunch of news gets dropped on the crew from Mozu, Kiwi, Chimney, and Gombe as they all arrive to let them know the new ship is done and that Frankie is ready to show it to them. while also at the same time, Zambai and the rest of the Frankie family rush to the Straw Hats to see if they're aware of the new bounty posters on their heads, which is incredibly exciting news because it's always amazing and fun to see just how much stronger and higher the bounties have gone up. But this time, it's very special because all 7 of them now have bounties placed on them. And each one is notable in their own way. So let's go through each of them. So Luffy and Zoro have already, huge bounties on their heads since Arlong Park and Arabasta. And their values go up significantly as Luffy has tripled his bounty to 300 million, while Zoro has surpassed Luffy's old value with 1.2 million, which they're both obviously proud and excited about. As well as, in addition, Robin has had her bounty slightly increased as well to a cool 80 million, along with her poster picture being updated from the adult one from her original child image. And now for the new ones. As first we got Nami at 16 million, which is kind of crazy when you think about the fact that Arlong was listed at 20 million in East Blue, just 4 million higher than her. And this picture was clearly taken very recently while she was, spying on Kobe and Luffy at the pool, as this is the same bikini she was wearing. But I love that she's posing all beautifully for her bounty poster, that it fits her personality and stylishness really well. And it makes you wonder, though, do the Marines just have undercover photographers everywhere taking these pictures, just in case? I mean, she later remarks how she thought it was for a reporter. And we do see a lot of those reporters in the filler, but it's kind of funny that she basically got a posed one, unlike the others. Like the original 3 bounty holders, the new members also get epithets to increase their sort of notoriety, which is really cool, as Nami's is the cat burglar Nami. Next, we have Chopper, who gets a hilariously low 50 berries, which he's just in utter shock at as he goes, Goju! And how slighted he's been. But to go along with his epithet, the cotton candy lover Chopper, he's got a very cute picture of him salivating over some cotton candy. And I don't even know where this even comes from, because this is, I feel like, the first time to my knowledge we're even made aware of the fact that Chopper loves sweets and cotton candy specifically. I almost feel like Oda just employed his sort of random creativity here, and he's just kind of like, yeah, let's just make him a cotton candy lover. And the reason for his low bounty is due to the fact that the Marines don't understand that Chopper is not enough. He is, in fact, an offensive force, but rather they think of him more as a pet to the crew. And then the next reaction is probably the best one, though. And I love that the anime added sort of that filler scene earlier, several episodes ago, to set this joke up even better by having Sanji imagine having his cool, badass wanted poster like Zoro. But it's, for some inexplicable reason, is not a photo, but a hilariously bad sketch, because they couldn't actually get a photo of Sanji. And I can't tell which is funnier, the poster itself or Sanji's real face as he reacts to it. It's so funny. But Sanji, like his sort of adoptive father, he gets an epithet worth being Zeph's son and apprentice. And just as Zeph was called the red leg Zeph, Sanji is now called the black leg Sanji, which I think is really awesome. And his bounty is set at 77 million, which is higher than Zoro's initial 60 million. One thing I really like is the fact that Sanji, even though they couldn't get a picture of him, it adds a bit of more elusiveness and mystery, to Sanji's character. Because he's always been able to avoid detection, and this is still somewhat preserved even though he gets a bounty poster, since people will still have no idea that what Sanji looks like. And he can still do all that sort of sneaky secret agent stuff that he does that I really enjoy seeing him do. But later we do learn that it wasn't anything mysterious or crazy that was, it was making it seem like when the soldier or the photographer shows his commanding officer the photo, and it was just a completely black image, making it seem like there's some sort of big conspiracy or sort of some horror mystery surrounding it. But then the commanding officer just kind of annoyingly asked, was the lens cap taken off? I love how intensely this scene is set up, and then it turns out the photographer assigned to take Sanji's picture was just a dumbass who forgot to take off his lens cap. Additionally, I laugh so hard when he's complaining to Luffy and Zoro about his terrible picture and he just starts wailing incoherently and Zoro just quietly retorts back, use your words. Like, it kills me every time when he's just like, and then also a note that in the manga during this scene, the speech bubble is just full of gibberish symbols akin to like Wingding's font to signify this, which is I think the first and only time we ever actually see this. Because usually, even if it's garbled, it's like either like squiggly lines or just it's written in hiragana, very like slightly off to sort of actually phonetically sound it out. But this is the first time where it's so incoherent that it's literally random symbols. It's pretty funny. Luffy also mentions that Sogeking has a bounty as well, although we don't get to see the value yet in the anime. However, this isn't like a secret or anything, because in the manga, like I mentioned in the differences section, his poster and value are displayed with the rest as they're all sprawled out. And so, it's strange that they don't ever actually show you the poster in the anime. In the manga, we see that his epithet is the King of Snipers, Sogeking, and his bounty is 30 million, which is pretty cool because, as we all know, that was Luffy's first initial bounty, which is wild to think that Usopp is now worth just as much as East Blue Luffy. It's also worth noting that the Marines are after Sogeking and still don't really know who Usopp actually is, which is, I guess, kind of helps Usopp out in terms of how he's always just terrified of being targeted. So, he's still got some cover at least. It's also pretty funny that everyone who originally had a poster are pretty satisfied with their new ones, while the newcomers are all kind of unhappy or in shock of theirs for one reason or another. Then lastly, Zanbai throws out one last poster with Frankie on it, known as the Cyborg Frankie, worth 44 million. He's now a wanted man as well, and the Frankie family, realizing just how much danger Frankie is now, given how hard they came after Tom and Iceberg while being in Water 7, and especially with Water 7 being so close to the Marines, it's no longer safe for him to be there, and all plead with the Straw Hats to take him, even if it's by force. But of course, Luffy had already decided that Frankie was the only person they wanted as their new Shipwright Nakama. And it's clear to Iceberg and Zanbai that Frankie wants to go with the Straw Hats, and his ultimate dream is not just to build the dream ship, but to see it through as well. And with that, they all pack up and head to the coast to be introduced to their new ship. And this was exciting, as we all can't wait to see what is this ship that's going to replace the Dear Going Merry going to be like. And there was a lot of anticipation surrounding this, especially with that emotional send-off for the Merry. Once they arrive, we find that Frankie isn't actually there, but left it to Iceberg to deliver the ship to them. And it's an amazing reveal. And, Zoro remarking that it's at least twice the size of the Going Merry, and Nami mentions that it's a sloop, which is I had to look this up, but it's a type of a mid-sized ship that utilizes one main mast. And it's known for its very quick and maneuverable body, and so, which is perfect for how much trouble they always seem to find themselves in. And it's outfitted with this awesome figurehead with a massive lion on it. And now, if you haven't noticed, it's very similar to my podcast logo. And that's because I modeled it after this figurehead. And as the name is also a reference to the ship as well. So the name of my podcast is kind of a spoiler for the next episode, or the next, I think, two or three episodes from now. But we'll talk about that in the next episode. And for all you eagle-eyed viewers and readers, you may have noticed the reference to the Merry reveal all the way back in Syrup Village, right down to the shot composition and the dong snapback that the camera movement mimics as well. And also the panel in the manga is framed exactly like it was when the Merry was first introduced as well. So I thought that was a really cool detail. Another thing that I also believe is a reference to that original Merry reveal, but this time it's with Luffy when he's talking to Iceberg about Frankie joining. He's leaning over the rail with both hands crossed, and Zoro kind of leaned back up against the upper part of the ship with his back almost, is exactly the same as when they asked Usopp to join back on Syrup Village. So it's a lot of nice little touches that I really appreciated that they referenced this scene from the original scene when Merry was introduced. Anyways, the design of this ship is incredible as we progressively see just how much personality it has and how well it fits their personalities so well. And as we'll see in future episodes, we'll also get to see what the features, what the interior, and what the features or what other stuff that the ship has. And you can really tell that it really does match their personalities. I can't wait to go through the ship later. We then see Zanbai and the others return to the Frankie house and surprised to find Frankie there, which necessitates them to make an impassioned plea for him to join the Straw Hats. But unable to sway him with words, they resort to the most absurd way of getting him to the ship that I could never think of. This is like an Oda thing. They steal his Speedo and start running through the city. So, of course, it leads to Frankie rampaging around Water 7, pantsless, flashing the entire city with everyone yelling, "Pervert, pervert." It's so ridiculous. And the lengths they go to censoring his crotch is hilarious, too. Like, I think my favorite is the bouncing baseball conveniently covering up his junk as he runs by. So great. Just when the Frankie family are at their limit, Luffy shows up to grab the Speedo and take it the rest of the way with the help of some of the other Straw Hats. And I love during this chase, Frankie is just casually explaining some of the features of the ships to Luffy. Everything about this is so weird, but it's so perfect. They do eventually get to the ship, and this is where we get after Luffy thanks him for the ship, he officially asks Frankie to become a Nakama and a Straw Hat member. Of course, Frankie's still feeling immense guilt and feels that he owes it to everyone to stay and serve in Water 7. It's now up to Luffy and the others to somehow convince him to join them. This will prove to be hilariously and painfully challenging. But first off, the whole premise of this strategy of using his Speedo as a bargaining chip is hilarious, but when Frankie is unfazed by this because why should he be swayed this much? Because of the Speedo is his favorite? Like, it just seems weird that he went after that when he could probably find a just as good one somewhere else. But it's more so because his lifelong debt to his hometown just outweighs the swimsuit. That's got to be pretty obvious. But it's hilarious how serious Luffy was approaching this by the way he reacts when he says, "I underestimated him. What a strong-willed guy. He is a man among men." That's then topped up with Nami just smacking him over the head, stating the obvious that he's just being a perv. And just then, Robin offers her services to help in the persuasion. And just then, Robin sprouts 2 arms out of Frankie's legs using the dos fleur and grabs his nuts and squeezes. Like, oh my god. Of all the ways Oda could have written this moment playing out, this one did not even cross my mind. But it's kind of genius because it fits Frankie's sort of pervy persona. And what better way to get someone like Frankie to join than to approach it this way? And just as Frankie kind of helped Robin come to terms with rejoining the crew back on the Puffing Tom, now Robin is going to be the driving factor in getting Frankie to join them. But I also can't understate how weird this is. But poor Frankie, that has got to be one of the most painful things I have ever seen. And I love that in the anime, they repeatedly animate Robin's fists clutching 5 times. Like it just goes whoosh, 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 like 5 different times just to emphasize the squeezing. And not to mention the reaction from everyone else. And I particularly love that Paulie is just shocked to the point where he's just frozen solid in place and only his cigar falls out of his mouth. Also in the anime, there's this, like I mentioned in the differences section, there's this added gag where they show something that looks like a testicle and Frankie just randomly says it. And it shows a shot of, the first one is a shot of Nami's tangerines. And like I said, Frankie yells out, "Oh, orange," in his, his weird accent. And randomly, there's some similar moments later on with the grapes and the apples, and they're both just as hilarious. And I love that little added touch. Luffy's probably got the best line in this entire episode, though, when he calls out to Robin, "Hey, Robin, I want him to still be a man when he joins us." He's like serious about this too. And you see Chopper just like freaking out in between the two of them. But on a slightly more serious note, Frankie then states that he's already accomplished everything when it comes to his dream ship and that he wants to stay on Water 7. But Iceberg interrupts him, saying that that's not entirely true and that all the stuff that Frankie says that he'd rather do on Water 7 is not what he truly wants to do, but more so it's done out of atonement for Tom being taken away. And we're then taken back to another short flashback where Frankie further elaborates on his dream, that it's not just his dream to build the ship, that the rest of it is that he wants to sail the world and be on that ship as its shipwright, and in effect even surpasses Master Tom, which Tom actually remarks on the fact that, yeah, he's going to be outdone by Frankie. And it's a pretty sweet moment, and we really truly see what Frankie wants to accomplish when it comes to his dream. And for a while, it's been pretty obvious that everything Frankie has been doing all these years on the surface seems like he's just causing trouble, but in reality, everything he's done is for the betterment of Water 7. Like Frankie rounding up all the struggling lost souls and youth of Water 7 into his Frankie family to give them a family and a home when the rest of the city had basically given up on them. Similarly, the reason he created a dismantling business was to sort of keep up with his vow to never build a ship, and so he went in the complete opposite direction into dismantling ships. And like I mentioned a while back, Iceberg has cared for Water 7 from the light, while Frankie has been caring for it in the shadows and in the slums, but both honoring their fallen master's wishes and taking care of the home that he loved so much and fought so hard to save. And this moment always hits so hard because of who it's coming from. Throughout the entire saga, Iceberg and Frankie have been at odds about many things from a very young age to a point where we see, from Iceberg's perspective, just how much seeming resentment there was between them, particularly from Iceberg's side. We've always known Tom forgave Frankie on that very day, but it was never clear when or if Iceberg ever forgave Frankie, considering when they lost Tom, Iceberg adamantly stated that he'd never forgive Frankie for the loss of Tom. But to now hear that not only has Iceberg forgiven Frankie, that he's the one to tell Frankie that, most of all, he should finally forgive himself. And it's an incredibly powerful and emotional moment, particularly because it comes from Iceberg. And I get very teary-eyed every time I watch this scene, because you see just how much guilt Frankie has been carrying his entire life to this point, where he was willing to give up on his most cherished dream just to continue to atone for that mistake because of the immense amount of guilt that he's been feeling all these years. I mean, that's like 20 years that he's been shouldering this guilt. Kind of also very reflective of Robin shouldering her guilt for 20 years. And and I love that sort of again, this additional parallel between the two because of the fact that this arc is centered on both of them so well, and that in their journey have been kind of mirrored, oddly enough, in many ways. Frankie's then moved to tears by the emotion and love he's receiving from his family as they wish for nothing but his happiness. And at this point, he's crying uncontrollably from the emotional send-off, but he's trying to pass it off as pain, even though it's revealed that Robin actually stopped crushing his balls a while back. And after another passionate plea from his family, and with the looming threat of Garp coming back, Luffy passes his Speedo back to Frankie and asks him once again, and Frankie this time bravely accepts the offer and is now the newest member of the Straw Hat crew to pursue his dream of sailing the world in his newly built dream ship. And it's pretty incredible how a character we started off, at least personally, despising, and from that we've grown to the point where I personally am, and as I'm sure many of you, had a very emotional reaction to his farewell. And of course, though, among all this heartfelt and emotional moments, it still wouldn't be Frankie, and by extension Oda, without a ridiculous ending as he thrusts and jumps up in the air with his ass up as a final goodbye to the island he loves and cares about so much, with Sanji remarking after the to be continued title card comes up, you can hear Sanji just say, "Put some pants on." It's a very Frankie moment, mixed with perversion, comedy, as well as heartfelt and emotion. Now, this is where these episodes ends, but one last thing I kind of wanted to draw your attention to. Now that Frankie is officially part of the crew, I've already talked about this in the spoiler section way back, but in episode 229, just before they arrived at Water 7, Luffy made a sketch of what kind of shipwright he wanted, and at the time it was just another throwaway joke about Luffy's crazy expectations and his horrible artistic skills. But if you go back and look at that sketch again, you'll notice that it was a huge foreshadow as to who he would end up as this shipwright, because that sketch looks an awful lot like a crude version of Frankie, with the color scheme being that light blue and white, and the big arms and the distinct nose. And while Frankie's not 5 meters tall or 16 feet, like he said, but Frankie is actually still an extremely tall and probably the tallest member of the crew now at 7.5 feet tall. So in essence, what Luffy described and just all those abstract things that he wanted are all in there with Frankie, which I find is an incredible detail, and it's just always funny to me how that actually worked out. I mean, I'm sure Oda planned that out, but it was just kind of it's really mind-boggling to think, because you think about it, episode 229, that's almost 100 episodes ago. That was in real time, I think, about 2 years worth, just under 2 years. And that's crazy to think that that kind of foreshadowing happened. And yeah, again, Oda, you're amazing. But yeah, with that, with a new crew member and shipwright aboard, they have to set sail pretty quickly, as Garp and the Marines have set their sights on the Straw Hats yet again. But there's still one last loose end that needs to be resolved before they can set sail. But we'll have to wait till the next podcast to see how the Usopp of it all gets resolved. If you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment. And if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Also, check out my Instagram and Twitter account at SunnyGo Podcast if you want updates of when I post new episodes or see some pictures of my manga collection. And also, I've started to stream via Twitch again. If you want to come chat or watch me play video games, I'd be happy to see you all at twitch.tv/sunny_go. That's SUNNY__GO. And yeah, I think it'd be cool. Just something fun I like to do. As always, I wanted to thank you for taking out the time to listen to my podcast. There will be a small spoiler section just commenting on a couple things. But if you're not interested in that, stay safe out there, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye! So yeah, just some small foreshadowing and spoiler section talk. Again, this is mostly unscripted, so just me rambling. But there's one line in there, obviously, with Luffy getting excited about seeing a skeleton that's alive in the Florian Triangle. And even though Zoro kind of gives him a hard time for this sort of excitement, this actually comes to pass, as this is foreshadowing for, obviously, Brook, which is the very first thing they encounter when they enter the Florian Triangle, which is really funny to see. Obviously, this doesn't take place very much long after the Water 7 arc, so this was clearly Oda foreshadowing that. But it is kind of funny to see that, yeah, Luffy, the thing that Luffy was most excited about seeing in the Florian Triangle is the first thing they met. Not to mention the fact that he becomes their next crew member, which is pretty awesome as well. The other thing I wanted to mention was Sanji's wanted poster, and sort of the payoff for that being Duval, which is just gold. I absolutely love where Oda went with this. Like, at first, when I remember when I read this for the first time and they revealed Sanji's poster, I was like, this is a really weird joke. I mean, I found it really funny, but I was like, I wonder where he's going with this, because of that one scene with the black image and the photographer. It makes it seem like there's some sort of an ominous conspiracy going on with Sanji. Like, I remember initially I thought, I wonder if there's some sort of like mystical or like evil energy surrounding Sanji that's preventing his pictures from being taken. But it turns out it's just all to set up a joke. And there's a little bit more to it later on. Obviously, the Duval thing was an immediate payoff to that. But I think one of the reasons why Oda delayed Sanji's wanted poster so much is because obviously once Sanji's real picture is shown after the events of Dressrosa, then his father and the Germa 66 come after him because they now see where Sanji is. And so I think obviously if the poster was really Sanji from the get-go, then this whole Germa and Judge storyline would have to it wouldn't make sense why they would hold off on coming after Sanji for so long, considering that they want him. But yeah, I think that's pretty incredible foresight for Oda to think about that as well. But we'll obviously talk about Duval and Judge later on. Anyways, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode. See ya!